presentation of bills without leave of the Senate first obtained, public business.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We continue the State of the Nation debate. Today, we have a presentation from Senator Matthew Samuda, followed by Senator Skeffrey.
Senator Samuda.
Mr. President, I ask for permission to speak from a seat not my own.
Granted.
Mr. President, I rise today a proud member of this Senate, honored to be making my third contribution to the State of Nation debate in this House. I am here today because of the recommendation of the Most Honourable Prime Minister to the Governor General that I be appointed to serve. We are all here, though, because God has blessed us with that chance to serve. And in acknowledgement of that blessing, I commit to redouble my efforts to provide that service to our beloved Jamaica. As I prepared for this presentation, I thought of those who have sacrificed for my foray into politics thus far, those who have been unyielding in their support. I have acknowledged many persons in my previous presentations, but I wish today to highlight the role of my partner, Kerry. She has often borne the heaviest load, and she has loaned me to my party, the Jamaica Labour Party, and indeed the country for service. Political service isn't easy. Contribution to national development is heavy, and quite often it is our families who, though not seen, help us to contribute, and she's actually here with us today. Well, we all make mistakes, I suppose, but to be determined. As I wish to place on record my thanks to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, the President whose consistent guidance is to be noted, the clerk and indeed all parliamentary staff, and certainly my own personal support team. Mr. President, this government under the leadership of the builder, Andrew Michael Holness, took the reins of leadership after the elections of February 2016. There are milestones that warrant or that trigger reviews and trigger the need to outline where we are going. I have found that the State of the Nation debates and certainly our budget debates provide the best opportunities for this review and for outlining the way forward. But before I dive into the major substance of my presentation, I'd wish to share with my colleagues an encounter I had earlier this week. Mr. President, I recently encountered a young man working in a government agency while attending upon a meeting related to the impending plastic packaging ban. He shared his view of the political landscape. He lamented the state of our debates in Parliament, much because of how contentious he viewed them to be. I had quite a long discussion with him about the democratic process. It did indeed force reflection. I'm of the view firmly that both sides of the political divide want the best for Jamaica. Those I have had the honor to serve with in this chamber on both sides of the aisle are particularly passionate about this rock we call home. We, however, have very different views on how to achieve that prosperity and progress for our home. We also have very different assessments in many cases of the past performance of the other side, invariably. As we debate passionately, sometimes tempers will flare. What we must, however, never allow is the type of political cronyism my colleague, Senator Floyd Morris, refers to in his book. I'm not sure if Skeffrey has had the chance yet to read it, but you should. It's a very good book. Senator Floyd. Apologies. He refers to in his book the story of his mother's business being displaced with a change of administration after an election. And that is precisely what we on both sides need to ensure we don't allow to happen. It is not the debates that shouldn't happen. It is not that they shouldn't be extremely passionate, because I believe we both want to seek the right things, and we disagree from time to time on the way to get there. Sometimes we won't even like what each other has to say, but what is clear is that as representatives we have that right, and that right should be protected, and it is necessary even when words are heard. It is for that reason that I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to begin once again joining us in the lunchroom. It is important, and I hope that you will yield to this request. Let us lead the way in showing Jamaicans that we can have wildly opposing views, but live side by side in harmony and break bread. Fair enough. Mr. President, hope you will allow me to dive now into the substance of my presentation this morning. I am a fan of party manifestos, Mr. President. I like to track the performance of a government in any territory as a fan of politics through its manifesto promises. The top line promise of this administration was growth and development in an inclusive manner, indeed to deliver prosperity. Our promises were best summarized in what was a 10-point plan. Today, Mr. President, I can stand here with pride that each of the points listed in our 10-point plan is either in place, complete, or work is underway, Mr. President. There's an interesting economic statistic that we on this side, I don't think, speak enough of. When there are criticisms of growth in this economy, I think it's important to advise and perhaps remind my colleagues and friends on that side that the growth rate in our first year in office was more than the cumulative growth for the 4 years that you were in office. That's a statistical fact. To put it another way, Mr. President, in 1 year under the JLP administration, we grew more than the cumulative growth in the 4 years before. This is also true for our second year in office, and God willing would be true for our third year in office when complete. You see, Mr. President, we are delivering more in 4. We are growing more in 4. And Mr. President, God willing, we are going to thrive in 5. I have never said and will never say that the opposition never did anything good, especially as it relates to the work done to stabilize the macroeconomic situation which faced Jamaica. Very credible work. However, it is my genuine opinion that in this baton race of self-governance, that this administration, led by the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, is delivering more than the previous administration did, virtually in almost every area of national life. The natural concern will always be raised as it relates to crime, but I am confident that this statement will hold true for national security by the end of our political term. I, however, wish to list some areas that I believe are worthy of mention that the country should be reminded of. Our work in infrastructure, Mr. President, is seen everywhere. You can't hide from it. Road work is unprecedented in urban and rural road work being done. Mr. President, when I look at the fact that $800 million has been allocated as opposed to the $200 million that used to be allocated for farm roads, is a credit to this point, Mr. President. I lived to see former Senator Norman Grant acknowledge that this $800 million investment played a critical role in the recent growth numbers for agriculture, Mr. President. That I was happy to hear, Mr. President. When I think of places like Gibbs Hill that have been paved over, Mr. President, there was our rural roads being done. We could talk about Constant Spring Road, we could talk about Barbican, but the fact is we can list many other rural roads which are being upgraded as well. Mr. President, our work in housing is nothing short of amazing. We are surpassing all that was done in the previous 4 years. Our water projects by way of the non-revenue project is critical to the viability and long-term sustainability of the National Water Commission. Schools have received unprecedented Schools have received unprecedented resources for structural works, Mr. President. Allocation to students and path are noteworthy. Early payments to schools to allow for smooth financial management by this administration is definitely worthy of mention, Mr. President. Work on our primary healthcare facilities can be seen right across the length and breadth of the country. And that's just a touch of some of the infrastructure work we're doing. Mr. President, I'm sure this is a point that some of my colleagues on the other side may disagree with, but it's a point that I feel strongly about. I'm very proud of the legislative work that we're doing. Groundbreaking legislation that target cultural norms that have bedeviled us for a long time are being targeted for change with bills like the NIDS Act and like the Zoso bill, Mr. President. Whether it is clearing the names of our national heroes or putting into legislation further measures that will modernize the financial sector, we have a lot to be proud of, colleagues. Our energy sector is being reformed and redeveloped and positioned as the engine for growth. Increases in support in the social safety net by way of increases in path payments, increases in minimum wage, is nothing to scoff at, Mr. President. The government is facing challenges head-on and is performing well. Providing a snapshot of how the economy is performing is important. I have said in this chamber, and I'll say again, a rising tide lifts all ships. Mr. President, colleagues, the tide is rising, and so too are the ships. Jamaica is growing. We can feel the hope and optimism, even coming from Senator Brown. No such thing. The recent announcement that the quarter ending in June of this year saw a growth of 2.2% was the highest growth in over 10 years. The quarter immediately after grew also by 1.9%. This is precisely why consumer and business confidence continue to ride high. The statistics, however, Mr. President, which are among my favorite to quote, are indeed employment statistics and poverty statistics, because they speak to the inclusivity of this growth. Unemployment rate declined to 8.4%, Mr. President. Youth unemployment rate went down to 22%, from a high in 2015 of 13.9 and 39 respectively, Mr. President. Now for context, this represents the greatest number of Jamaicans ever employed. The employment rate is at its lowest it has been in 50 years. Concurrently, poverty rates are now declining. This in comparison to the fact that statistically we had increases in 2015. The inclusivity of this initial growth spurt is not limited to job creation, President, but rather we see it in the business registration numbers, Mr. President. We see it also in the participation now on the stock exchange, not just with new companies being listed, but with the number of Jamaicans who have actually bought stocks and now a part and investing in their country and having ownership in some of these companies. The signs of prosperity are on the horizon. They're everywhere. When we consider 13.7% increase in exports in 2017 over the previous year, it is more reason for hope, Mr. President. We, however, cannot take these early gains and become complacent. There are steps we must take to unlock the true potential of the Jamaican economy. Last year in my State of the Nation presentation, I spoke for the need to unlock funds tied up in what I classify as over-regulation. Pension funds. When one thinks of the announcement recently from Dr. Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance, where the government will revise investment limits for pension funds moving up to 5%, that will release $25 billion into the economy. It is a good step for investment into our country. I have raised every year since I've been afforded the opportunity to speak in this debate the need for revision of the minimum capital test requirement for general insurance companies. Our legislation, as I understand it, was patterned on the Canadian legislation for general insurance companies. The minimum capital test in Canada is 150%. The minimum capital test in our space is 250%. It is simply too high, and we tie up billions of dollars that could be being reinvested for higher return, creating jobs and providing growth. The FSC must move quicker to act on this. We heard it in the Regulations Committee at the time when Senator Reid was chairing it, that they were looking at it. I think we're looking a little too long now. It's time that that target is revised downward. Even if it is going to be kept at a higher target for riskier companies as they rank them, they need to revise it downward and unleash billions of dollars into the economy, Mr. President. This over-regulation and even burdensome approach to our financial institutions is born out of a particular historical context. The meltdown of the financial sector in the 90s and the experience with FinSac is at the core of why we have over-regulated to protect ourselves from some of the same mistakes happening again. However, we can't kill a mosquito with a sledgehammer. We can't over-regulate. Last year, I mentioned, and I'm going to mention again, I'm disappointed in my administration having called for years for a FinSac report, being in the power now to do so. We must bring the FinSac report to a close and we must table it in Parliament and let's have the discussion. I find it unacceptable that it has not come here yet. I wish to provide just a few more economic highlights before I move on from the economics. The government has taken some major steps to improve our tax system and has seen some of the benefits. The 1.5 million tax plan, which shifted measures from direct to indirect forms of taxation, the removal of GCT from agricultural inputs, the fuel tax restructure that reflected our current mix, the realignment of room tax paid by foreigners, and even on group health insurance, something that we have discussed in the past. Government imposed a GCT measure on group health insurance in April 2017. But important to note is that year to date where you are, you've actually seen a 4% increase in the numbers of persons insured on group health policies, Mr. President. So you've actually seen an increase. And because of the nature of health insurance and health care, this is a measure that we have to watch. Because I expected that there would have been increases. I didn't expect there to be any fallout. But the truth is, should there ever be, it is a measure that we would need to revisit. It's a type of measure because of the social good that it provides we have to be very careful with. But thus far it is performing as we said it would. Mr. President, customs. When we spoke to how we were going to achieve higher compliance, I said it was impossible. There was a lot of pushback. But the fact is, quarterly customs continues to announce surpassing of its targets. I recall Senator Brown calling for a tax review commission or a committee of sorts to look at all of our tax system. Senator Brown, I supported your call then, I still support it now. I don't think we should go to another budget debate without taking a firm look at how we're going to analyze our tax system and measure the results quarterly, monthly, going forward. You have my support on that call. We don't want to overburden the poor, and we want to ensure that more persons participate in the formal economy. Productivity and capacity is the way. It is not just unleashing capital. Capital unleashed on a bureaucracy that is not ready to accept it will not give us the results that we need. In the November issue of the Harvard Business Review, it takes aim at bureaucracy, albeit commercial bureaucracy, but it still makes some valuable points. The article starts as follows. Bureaucracy has few fans. The Walmart CEO, Doug McMillan, calls it a villain. Berkshire Hathaway Vice Chair, Charlie Munger, says its tentacles should be treated like the cancers they so much resemble. Jamie Dimon, of the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase, agrees that bureaucracy is a disease which saps initiative, inhibits risk-taking, and crushes creativity. It is a tax on human achievement. And this speaks to why we have had so many challenges in achieving that Jamaican dream that we all want for the country. We have to view bureaucracy as the enemy. Simply releasing capital won't be sufficient. We must move faster with our investments in capacity by way of infrastructure and the education of our people. But as a country, we must embrace public sector transformation. And though it will create some discomfort and even potential dislocation, it is absolutely necessary. We must embrace technology in all of our processes. Transformation and embrace of technology is necessary to remove the unnecessary bureaucracy, which is like a chain around our ankles. Mr. President, it is no secret that the environment and its protection is a passion of mine. For too long, we have paid scant regard to this issue. The issue of protecting our God-given asset, which is the beautiful island of Jamaica. Environmental protection does not mean economic stagnation. Similarly, economic development should not trigger environmental degradation. At this juncture, I wish to acknowledge those who work in the agencies and indeed the ministry fighting for the protection of our environment. They are a committed and hard-working group. It is, however, no secret that they have never been adequately resourced. It is precisely because of this I wish to acknowledge civil society members, private sector agencies, groups like Capri for their advocacy and research they provide to successive administrations, which has helped us in policy forming immensely. I wish to acknowledge their work, but in particular single out the work of the Jamaica Environment Trust. Environmental protection is a shared goal. The opposition spokesperson on matters of the environment has been an extremely constructive partner in the government's push to entrench protection. I wish to formally thank Senator Fraser-Binns for her sober contribution to the process. Mr. President, the government led by the Most Honourable Andrew Holness is the greenest we have seen in independent Jamaica. Notable environmental action includes the long-awaited establishment of the cockpit country boundary, the decision to not allow development of the Goat Islands and protecting the surrounding waters, the decision to not allow a coal plant in St. Elizabeth. These two decisions, we forewent millions and billions of dollars of potential investment, but we were not going to degrade the environment with those two investments, Mr. President. The 14 forestry orders which this Senate itself passed, providing protection against deforestation, importantly now has moved Jamaica to just about 30% of its landmass designated for protection, which is twice the UN global target, Mr. President. The ban on some single-use plastic items is not easy, but we should be proud of it as the Senate voted for such a measure. Though these are notable achievements, there is much more to be done. This government, Mr. President, I believe is up to the task. Minister Darrell Vaz has already indicated the following major actions are indeed very near. These actions include the first quarter launch of a deposit refund scheme for plastic bottles. And I've noted in previous presentations, this is a continuation of what I would have considered a test tube case, which was launched under the JEEP program, Recycling Partners, which has created the knowledge and a lot of the experience which we will now transition into a far bigger program that will target removing 85% of plastic bottles from the environment. So credit is due to both sides. Removal of tires from landfills. I know the minister plans to come to the country very soon with an announcement as to how this will be accomplished. But the target is within 5 years to have no tires on landfills and remove that particular environmental risk. This is a major, major victory for the environment. The development orders which near completion are investments in shoreline protection and increased sewage processing capacity. The Helsha plan, which is before Cabinet. The goal of modern environmental protection for Jamaica is possible, colleagues. It is possible to have a carbon neutral Jamaica. It should be our goal. Plans like NEPA's million tree planting program, plans like the 5 million fruit tree program announced by Minister Shaw in May of this year make this carbon neutral target possible. There are, however, significant legislative reforms required to remove some of the dysfunction from the current structure, which splits responsibility across way too many agencies. We cannot shy away from the tough legislative reforms, and we cannot shy away from taking the tough steps necessary to face our environmental problems. I wish to hone in on one before I come off of the topic of the environment. Parrotfish. It's been in the news. We discussed it even with the Fisheries Act. I'd asked the orderly to circulate a copy of a letter, which is more of a proposal than a letter, which I've shared. I had discussions with our environmental groups and many of our environmental professionals, and I thought it would be good for a cohesive approach or a cohesive statement of support of some actions to be taken as it looks at reforming the issue of how we manage our fisheries and the way we think. And though it was sent to me, I'd shared it with my colleague across the island. I'm sharing it with colleague members here. Members of the media have not shared it with you because they intend to table it they intend to present it to the nation as a paper next week. I leave that to them, and I thank them for the work they would have put in on this. To note, it is signed by the Jamaica Environment Trust, the Alligator Head Foundation, Dr. Peter Edwards, the Jamaica Institute of Environmental Professionals, the Montego Bay Marine Park Trust, the Nature Conservancy Jamaica, Yardi Environmental Conservationist. No, sir, we're not there yet. We're talking about parrotfish, sir. I will not go through the details in length here today, as there will be ample time for that as we look at how we manage our fisheries sector. It is my view, though, Mr. President, that a committee of the Parliament should consider the recommendations made by this unified group. Our 18,000 fisher folk deserve careful consideration. Our children deserve to benefit from our territorial waters and from the coastal experience of growing up in an island. We have immense untapped wealth from the pelagic flow that must be harnessed. We should explore a temporary closure of the parrotfish fishery by way of a season being implemented is at minimum what is required during the detailed analysis of the problem. Carefully crafted implementation plans to ensure no fallout for fisher folk are important, and we don't want to put them under financial stress. The proposal as it is there before us speaks to some of the ways that this can be implemented. The fact is, though, President, is that this temporary situation would have to lead, in my mind, to an eventual ban of the consumption of parrotfish in Jamaica. The science on the matter is clear. Sustainability requires it. We have a duty to act. We have a duty to ensure, however, that we act in a considered way and that the Parliament calls in all stakeholders and has a very serious discussion about how we implement such a measure. Mr. President, I move on to a matter, I think, of national importance and national, it's very topical at the moment. When we think of St. James recently, we think of the state of emergency and we think of the fact that in recent years, annually the murder rate has increased since about 2012. St. James last year recorded 332 murders. Mr. President, this puts the homicide rate for St. James, if it was a country, they love to refer to themselves as the Republic of Montego Bay and tease us that we need passports to visit. But if it was a country and indeed required such passports, the murder rate would be 54 for every 100,000. Mr. President, this rate far exceeds the United Nations definition of a homicide epidemic. The fact is, to put this data further into context, this rate exceeds such large cities that have crime problems that we know of well, like Guatemala City, which is at 47 per 100,000. Detroit has a murder rate of 43 per 100,000. New Orleans has a murder rate of 41 per 100,000. Tijuana, that we all see on TV when they're showing their drug gang wars, has a murder rate of 39 per 100,000. This would make Montego Bay amongst the most murderous places, not just in Jamaica, not just in the world currently, but in the history of the world, Mr. President. The fact is, we had more murders in Montego Bay than they had in New York with 8 million people, with a population of 180,000. It's a crisis. There's no way to frame it. It has been a crisis for a long time. That crisis has morphed from the issues started with unstructured housing developments, with the economic boom that would have started in the 50s with hotel developments and that sort of thing. It got worse with the input and the impact of the drug trade in the 90s, which financed a lot of the criminality. And then it exploded on the back of the latter scam. It is a problem that has been there for a long time, but to not define it as an emergency, I've always found it strange. For decades across, but Mr. President, I wish to point to something in particular. For decades across multiple administrations, the state of our detention facilities, including lockups and prisons, have been in need of significant improvement. The fact is, some of the current penal institutions have existed from colonial times, when emphasis was not placed on human rights. It is good that this administration has made unprecedented investments in education and improving the capabilities and capacity of our security forces. And though resources are tight, Mr. President, perhaps it is time for the state to consider moving forward with building a new facility for persons taken into custody by the state to be kept in appropriate conditions. I have had informal discussions with members of the private sector who've expressed ideas about joint partnerships towards building of such a facility, where the facility may be located, and how. I started by saying unprecedented investments in education. Also, which facilities may be upgraded, and I'm sure those are issues which may be explored at a later date. But Mr. President, ahead of the last extension of the St. James SOE, myself, Senator Albin Hill and Senator Charles Sinclair went and toured the operations in St. James. We wanted to see for ourselves every level of the operations and to understand where people stood. No, sir. No, sir. I heard you recommended same, but the good sense prevailed. Quite so. Quite so. But we didn't simply pontificate from this noble chamber and vote along party lines. We actually wanted to go see, and we went. Time?
The member's time having expired, may I ask that it be extended to allow him to conclude his presentation?
Clearly, the question has been answered. All in favor. Senator Samula.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues.
While he's on extension, he has gotten an extension.
Well, there you go. But, we wanted to see and we wanted to speak to the people in St. James. So we toured and we discussed the matters with the security forces. We went and met with business owners. We spoke to citizens in and around checkpoints, and we even went into communities where there were no visible checkpoints. And we spent the entire day, and perhaps most importantly, we also toured the holding facilities to see the state of lockups for ourselves. Now, there is unfortunately a perception in the public domain based on what touring journalists and police have said, as at this morning, that the public defender's report to Parliament was alarmist and inconsistent with the truth. That is a regrettable state for our nation. There is no doubt regarding an account given by the PD, Mr. President, that it was alarmist in my mind. Mr. President, it is important that this country has confidence in the words uttered by the holder of said office. Recently, the concerns were raised in her report, state of the detention of facilities in St. James. Mr. President, this is not an issue to be dismissed. However, what the public defender referred to has nothing to do with the SOE. In fact, I'm aware that there are reports done over a decade ago at the public defender's office now, gathering dust, not tabled in Parliament. Mr. President, those reports over 10 years old speak to everything that was in her report now by way of conditions. In fact, successive administrations have made not the investment required. I didn't say that. What I'm saying is the report is conflated and leads us down a wrong road. The conditions have nothing to do with the SOE and the security measures. The conditions of the holding facilities require immediate upgrade. However, that has nothing to do with us putting in place a step to protect the lives of hundreds of Jamaicans, Mr. President. Mr. President, the reason I've said nothing new is because it is 2 decades of reports that I was able to find and comments in the public space about the condition of our holding facilities and our jails and our prisons. 2 decades just from peripheral searches that I've found. It has nothing to do with the SOEs. They weren't all held at the same time, respectfully. And even in fact, the issues, I think if you look at the article published this morning on even the issues by way of children and by way of women, it raises concern in terms of how that report was tabled and brought across to the Parliament. We can't say that, well, that is your view, that is not mine. They have latched, I'd say, what is unfortunate though, President, is that members of the opposition have latched on to the utterances of the public defender, and I would say without doing their own research.
On a point of order, Mr. President.
But it's quoted in the papers.
State the point.
Mr. President, on point of order.
State the point, Senator
The
Brown.
public defender is a commission of this Parliament. If remarks are going to be made against the public defender, I believe a right should be given for response, because what I'm getting from Senator Samuda is that, yes, the things were there, but somehow what she said is inconsistent. But what bothers me is that the Minister of Justice of his party, of his government, has apologized for these conditions.
And the point of order.
So I'm wondering whether or not if the Minister apologized, is the Minister inconsistent? Because if not, Senator Samuda is misleading the Parliament.
Senator Samuda.
There was a comment made earlier this week by the Member of Parliament for South East St. Anne, the PNP's Lizana. The ruling. I was indicated that has to continue.
You want me to refer to Robert's rule, Senator Skeffrey, or you're saying that you are misleading. The point is, Senator Samuda, Senator Brown complains that you might be misleading. Please continue, because I don't rule that way.
Nothing I've said is misleading, Mr. President. Mr. President, comments made earlier this week from the Member of Parliament for South East St. Anne that she would be hard-pressed to support further extensions of the SOE I found quite unfortunate. The member has said a measure that has contributed to the 70% reduction in murders in St. James is something that should be hard-pressed to support. The Commissioner of Police yesterday said in the public space that this is the lowest.
Misleading, Mr. And a point of order, Mr. President. The member for South East St. Anne was not about against policing. It's about the condition in which poor black Jamaicans are detained. I don't know, probably Senator Samuda supports those conditions. We on this side don't. We defend the people. We believe in standing up for justice, not only when you hear the freedom bell, but when it affects poor Jamaican people.
That's a speech.
Mr. President, that point of order is misleading because I said nothing that said I supported the state of the conditions of holding facilities. So that is not the case. Mr. President, fact is the murder total in St. James this year is the lowest it has been in 15 years. The right to life of a fair estimate that the right to life of 321 Jamaicans has been preserved because of the measures we have taken, Mr. President. Mr. President, you can see it how you wish to on that side. I know how I see it. And as I said and started, you have the right to make your contributions. I have the right to make mine and tell you where I see it. The Jamaican people, Mr. President, are watching closely. Law-abiding citizens in areas where states of emergency have been declared are living in a more peaceful life and are more secure and more protected. The likelihood of people and their children surviving has far been increased because of the measures that we have put. You know, I would hate that these utterances don't suggest any attempt to undermine the SOE. The security forces have said it is premature to end SAME. I'm here to remind the opposition that their politicking and attempt to undermine the SOE is clear as day to the Jamaican people. I put it to you, sir, that if the security forces, after their assessment of the situation...
Excuse me. Motive.
Did you ask for...
Pardon?
I didn't hear it from Senator Knight.
In the last debate on the state of emergency, I abstained from the vote. And I abstained because of a considered position. And I do not appreciate the reference to that act as undermining or politicking. Senator Samuda ought not to ascribe that kind of motive to the opposition, and certainly not to me. And I say me because of the position that I took on the last occasion that we debated that here. It is wrong and against the standing orders, and whilst I don't expect a withdrawal, because that would be too much to expect, I would hope that you don't continue along that path.
Senator Samuda.
Mr. President, it is certainly not my intention to ascribe motive to Senator Knight. I am making reference to comments made in the public space by the MP of Southeast St. Ann, Senator Knight. She is a spokesperson of the opposition. If it is felt, Mr. President, that motive has been ascribed to the opposition as a whole, then quite frankly I withdraw. Okay? But make no mistake, no President. The country is watching, and there will be a political price to pay in our democracy should the opposition decide to shut down the enhanced security measures, which is the SOE in St. James. That is my position. Before I move on, Mr. President, former Security Minister Peter Bunting has been busy in the public domain arguing that it's saturation policing only which has contributed to the decline in murders in areas where states of public emergency have been declared. And hence, gains made in the crime fight are not due to the state of public emergency. Members who I have spoken to in the security forces, and certainly members who have spoken publicly, say he is wrong. They say the public state of emergency has given them unique ability to remove from crucial spaces major violence producers and given communities some breathing space while they prepare airtight cases and secure witnesses who could have otherwise been murdered. The state of public emergency should not be discredited. It should not be. Mr. President, it is time that the Central Manchester MP move on from this facile reasoning. He who I know is able to do better must do better. In seeking to disparage gains made in the crime fight, Mr. President, it was rather unfortunate to hear the MP this week selecting 1 or 2 random years when his administration was in office to seek to downplay the 321 fewer murders this year. These numbers refer to Jamaican people, Mr. President. Since Member Bunting has chosen to play politics with the numbers, then let us be clear that the murder rate over the last 30 years increased almost 500%, Mr. President. That is the country that it is under. So if he wants to play politics with the numbers, let us remember that it was under the PNP administration in 2005 that we became the murder capital of the world, Mr. President. I understand this attempt to gain traction and seize opportunity occasioned by a situation where members of his party are certainly not happy with the leadership of Peter Phillips. But he should avoid simplistic and hypocritical reasoning.
No. First of all, the reference...
Senator Knight.
The reference... Please, let's have some dignity in this chamber. There is, if you don't want to call his name properly, just say the leader of the opposition. You had to correct yourself earlier in respect of Senator Skeffrey. You corrected it in another situation. Please, you have a future. Don't blight it.
Point taken, Senator Knight. Senator Samuda.
Mr. President, I have spoken in this Parliament before on the issue of the signal that our current political leaders who offer themselves of the office send in their posture in relation to crime. I call on all of my colleagues to be very careful. I will say this before I move on, sir, and let me state it clearly. There are prominent people currently in our political space who are vocal about crime and violence and publicly calling on the government of Jamaica to do this and that. But as you will see very soon, they are hugging up people they should not be, Mr. President. There is, at a later date and at the appropriate time, this country will be given more details about these wrongdoers. And they know themselves. And if we are to improve the state of our nation, they must stop it and be made to stop it. Mr. President, as I come to the end of my presentation, I wish to posit the following. Governments are indeed judged by citizens by one simple question. Am I better off than when they took office? And the resounding answer is yes, Mr. President. Are my hopes and dreams more possible today than they were in February 2016? The answer is a resounding yes, Mr. President. Are we closer to achieving the goals set out in Vision 2030? Again, Mr. President, the answer is yes. Jamaica is better off because of the actions and the work of the Andrew Holness-led administration, Mr. President. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy, said Martin Luther King, Jr. The path to transformation, progress, or prosperity, whichever term you prefer, can't be expected to be smooth, comfortable, convenient, and without challenges. We are bravely confronting the structural weaknesses and cultural abnormalities which have bedeviled this country for far too long. I am proud of the administration's courage in confronting these systemic issues. Progress requires development. Development requires action. And indeed, development requires a builder. So colleagues, if you really want to build a Jamaica that works for all and prosper our children, you need the right contractor. And that has been demonstrated that that person is indeed the builder, Andrew Michael Holmes. Mr. President, if it pleases you, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Senator Samuda. Senator Skeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to make my contribution in this year's 2018 State of the Nation debate. Let me first thank the Heavenly Father for continued life and energy and give us the wisdom as we face each day. Let me thank my family, my wife, Lydia, daughter, Adria, for putting up with me each day. I'm on the hustling politically and otherwise, and for taking good care of me. Yeah, man, Auntie. Austin, sorry, my apology there. Also, to my mother. She's not in the island now, but I want to thank her for her support each day. And also, as she goes through, still hurting. She lost her husband in summer of this year to the dreaded cancer. And, she's still going through the moment. And I ask her to stay strong. God knows best all the time. To our party leader, who continues to give us support on this side and his guidance, Honourable Dr. Peter Phillips, next Prime Minister of Jamaica. My colleagues, senators, on this side we are indeed a family. They called us the Dream Team of 8, and we continue to represent well. And when I said that we are a family, Dream Team of 8, and when I say we're a family, we're indeed a family. We learn from each other. We support each other's strength and guide each other along our weakness. Because weakness we all do, because we are human beings. And to the staff of Parliament, led by the clerk and her staff, we say thank you for supporting and guiding us each time. Mr. President, My presentation today is entitled Education, that critical transformational tool. In this regard, I will critique aspects of the current programs and initiatives within the Ministry of Education, while providing some recommendations to promote the transformation within the sector that is necessary to bring about quality outcomes. I will also look briefly on a few other issues of national importance. Mr. President, the current confusion and chaos in the public domain as a result of the misinformation with respect to the primary exit profile PEP pilot performance task mock exam is a clear indication that this government is suffering from an implementation deficit, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is my belief that the minister owes the nation a public apology, and he should then, after giving it, offer his resignation to the most honorable Prime Minister. Yeah. Indeed. The way in which the results were communicated to the nation is perceived by many. You will have your time to contribute. Listen to me now and learn. Is perceived by many as an attempt by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and the Minister of Education, Youth and Information to deceive the students, parents, teachers, and the general public. Mr. President, why didn't the minister present the results separately based on the three distinct categories? That is mastery, near mastery, and non-mastery, so as to remove any doubt as to his intention.
Point of order, Mr. President.
State the point.
I ask a question.
The member is misleading the Senate. The reports were sent to the schools. Individual reports were sent to each school and each student. So don't come here and mislead the Senate. Withdraw that.
Mr. President, I asked a question. I said, and I repeat, why didn't the minister present the results separately based on the three distinct categories? I said nothing else.
Mr. President, the member would be misleading because he should have done his research. He should have no, you can't come here. You can't come here.
I just asked a question, I don't continue.
But you should have done your research.
Come on, and I will continue.
Why you coming to ask the question?
And I will continue.
It is already there.
Mr. President, when the press conference took place in October, I'm not talking to parents and students because I'm not privy to private results. I'm a member of the public. The minister had a press conference and he did not give the results in the three distinct categories. It's as a result of questions asked by the opposition spokesperson on education, answered by the state minister, that the clarification came to the nation. That is the why I am asking. When you're updating the nation as a minister, you give the facts, nothing but the facts and the total truth.
Mr. President, this member is not going to be allowed to get away with that.
Are you stating a point? Are you answering a point?
Yeah, he is misleading the nation because all former ministers, in giving results, don't break out those categories. Minister Thwaites don't break out the categories. Don't come here and ask. I, in my presentation, gave the categories, nearly met, and having met the standards. That was the report I gave. I had no obligation to give any broader report. The individual reports were given to schools and the individual students and parents.
No.
Senator Knight.
Yes, sir. The minister has not raised a point of order. He has answered the question, but now is not the time to answer that question.
Your
So
point
please,
is your point is taken, Senator Knight.
Thank you.
Mr. President, may I move on?
Senator Skeffrey,
Thank you very much, Mr. President. That is mastery, near mastery, and non-mastery, so as to remove any doubt to his intention, which has been theorized by many as one to deliberately mislead the nation. How can we merge near mastery and mastery and then call it satisfactory?
Mr. President, point of order. The terminology that was used was standard met, standard nearly met, and standard not met, which is not the same term as mastery.
You need
the
to
term
state.
mastery was never used. This is a different test. This is a different
It cannot
He
be
cannot
done
come here
this
and use
way.
the term mastery to equate a matrix that said standard met, standard nearly met, and standard not met for a mock exam designed by
Mr.
these
President,
persons.
Mr. President,
Leader.
this can be seen by everybody to be not a point of order. The minister will have an appropriate time to make a response. The standing orders of the Senate must be upheld. The member is not raising a point of order, and we must not allow the standards to decline.
Mr. President?
No, I am going to recognize Senator Knight, Senator Samuda. I'm going to recognize Senator Skeffrey to complete his presentation, preferably without an interruption, unless
Mr. President?
Unless there's a clear point of order that you put to the President.
Mr. President?
Thank you.
This result is out there. Up to on Wednesday night, I was watching all angles. We're the senior technical director in the coordinator administration was, and the result, mock exam, performance task component, mastery, on the screen of the national television. 3.7% mathematics, 1.5% science, and so on. So the minister, when he makes his contribution in this honorable chamber, can clarify and the public will judge. So I will not change my terms because that is the terms that are out there in the public domain. And everybody has that. The minister, the representative that is representing the ministry in this issue, and CVM, TVJ use the same terms. So there's confusion within the very ministry. The senior technical director, Robert Morgan, reinforced the very categories, Marlon Morgan, the very categories that I'm speaking to. And that is the facts I have. Okay, so Mr. President, the question is, how can we merge near mastery with mastery and then call it satisfactory? If that is the norm in the ministry, I immediately call for a review of that practice. Mr. President, it makes no logical sense in communicating to parents results, telling that their son or daughter got near mastery on an exam, but they should be satisfied with that. It's like a teacher telling the students that they almost passed the maths end of term exam and everything is good. That's madness, Mr. President. You can't combine mastery and near mastery and then give it an overall level of satisfactory. If you are near mastery, it is not satisfactory. You are on the road to be satisfactory, but you are not there yet. You can't tell the students that. That is misleading in my view, in my conclusion, Mr. President. The problem we are now encountering with PEP stems from a lack of prior and comprehensive preparation by the government. The national standard curriculum that the exam will be based on was not rolled out on time across the sector for proper understanding and comfort by all critical players in the teaching and learning process. Also, Mr. President, there was limited and inadequate preparation for our teachers with respect to grasping the new curriculum. Also, little or no resource materials to adequately guide the teachers and learners with respect to this new curriculum, coupled with no initial sample items to coach and guide the students. Mr. President, it is also sad to note that there was no serious and proper consultation with critical stakeholders before the start of the school year 2018-2019. It is after poor results in the mock exam that any serious and comprehensive engagement with key stakeholders started.
The member.
Will you state the point of order?
If
If you're standing, are you standing at point of order?
The House, because the National Standards Curriculum, in regards to consultation, several amount of consultations were taking place. Former Minister announced PEP to be implemented in 2016 and 2017, so a lot of the work was long done before I became Minister. So no mislead the House.
So I'm talking under your stewardship.
And under my stewardship,
you get your chance to debate. Yeah, man, you can say that when you speak. That's why it's a State of the Nation debate and each of us have our chance.
But it's not a state of misleading.
Yeah, man, the President overrules you. When you have created confusion, that's what you classify it as, misleading.
That is why we need critical thinking.
A point of order must be put to the President by any senator. And until I recognize you to state the point of order, you really can't state the point of order.
Mr. President,
Senator
I am the only item on the agenda for today. I stay until 7 o'clock. I'm in no haste.
But you will...
I'm in no haste.
You will, of course, stay with the facts.
No, you, Mr. President, with due respect, you can't determine what the facts are. Please, so don't, please, with due respect. With due respect, don't urge me unless you know what the facts are.
I am encouraging you, Senator Skeffrey. That's all. That's allowed.
Mr. President, let me repeat. The government is just now, according to the ministry's senior technical coordinator, having consultation with board chairman and vice chairman along with other key individuals. Are we serious, Mr. President? The board is the key policy maker of our schools on behalf of the government. One would think that they would be engaged from the initial stage. You'll get your turn, man. So you're too nervous, man. Relax. Drink some water and relax. Man, give me some of the water. Clearly, an implementation deficit. Mr. President, let me remind the government that prior preparation prevents poor performance. And we tell our students this every day. However, the government seems not to be aware of this. The inefficient handling of the preparation and implementation of PEP in the education system is an indication of the lack of critical thinking by the government. The very skill set that the national standard curriculum should develop in our children and PEP should assess them for. Mr. President, what we're talking about the issues here in PEP. If you ask parents every day, they are confused. It's a real issue of confusion. So we can try to put a mirage on the issue. The issue is real. Some might not talk, but that is the reality. Educators, parents, and the students themselves. Mr. President, to further support my point about the perceived deliberate act by the minister to mislead the country. If we are familiar with the assessment mechanism of the then grade 4 literacy test, which was reported under the heading Mastery, Near Mastery, and Non-Mastery. Mr. President, any child that was assessed as Near Mastery and Non-Mastery had to repeat the exam before they were allowed to sit GSAT. If they did not attain mastery, listen, man, you know, listen. No, man, you listen. You're going to get a chance to talk.
The President, Mr. President, you need to protect the member.
Let him talk. Let him talk.
When you finish giving your presentation, I'll continue mine.
But Senator Knight, you are engaging in the same behavior. The cross.
No, yes.
The crosstalk is both ways.
Please relax. You know what? Now make it. You finished making your presentation now? And I have all day till 8 o'clock. I have all day. Mr. President?
No. No. We're descending.
Senator Knight, I didn't hear
A
why you're
point
standing.
of order.
Thank you. Will you state the point, sir?
It is wrong under the standing orders for the leader of government business, a senator, to accuse a senator who is making his presentation that he's lying. And he said lying. He said lying. So if you are going to now tell me that he did not say that, he said lying. It is wrong. Senator Samuda, in his presentation, spoke to the fact of a dissatisfied Jamaican about proceedings in Parliament. And you're exacerbating that. He should be called on to withdraw it. He should withdraw it, especially when he's sitting as the leader of government business. Suppose they followed it.
Where's the example? Take it from me, you should withdraw it.
Senator Reid, would you consider withdrawing the term lying?
You should stand up and address the president.
Courtesy in the Senate.
And as a religious man.
Mr. President, the terminology, if you have a difficulty with it, I withdraw it and use the term misleading. My point is that the member, if he's going to quote me, must quote me correct. I did not report mastery. I reported standard met, standard nearly met, and standard not met. And it is not the same thing. It is not the same thing.
The Senate accepts misleading and would ask Senator Scaffery to try and see if we can stay on an agreed term.
And I will stay with my presentation, Mr. President. As I said again, the minister will get his turn at the decree. You can determine however you want.
Mr. President,
No, you can't
you just asked Senator Reid to withdraw,
Senator Brown.
to withdraw the term lie. It's unparliamentary.
And he's using it again.
And it is disrespectful. And you asked him, he withdrew it, and then he repeated. If he's serious and he expects us to show respect, then he ought not to be accusing the member, the senator, of lying.
Yeah, they don't want us to
And especially when the facts are clear. And I urge you again to ask him to withdraw it and to desist from using that term. And as Senator Knight said, sitting where he sits as a leader of government business, as a leader of the Senate, sitting where he sits as a Minister of Education, Youth and Information, sitting where he sits as a religious minister or a man who's deep in religious affairs, he should. And as a principal of Jamaica, former principal of Jamaica College, in fact still principal because he's on secondment.
I think
we
you have
ask
stated
that he withdraw the comment and desist
you have
from
stated the point, and really the relevant point is that it is in the Senate. Whatever else he is, that's what he is. In this chamber, we're talking about the practice in the Senate. Senator Reid has graciously accepted to use misleading rather than that other term. Senator Scaffery.
Mr. President, having withdrawn it, he used it again.
After the repeat, he withdrew it. Senator Scaffery, I'm going to ask you to continue. Senator Knight, I've ruled. Senator Scaffery, will you continue, please?
Mr. President, any child that was assessed under the grade 4 literacy test, that's what I'm talking about. The So on the literacy test, is scored a certain way. For mastery, for near mastery and non-mastery, had to repeat that exam before they were allowed to sit GSAT if they did not attain mastery before the time of the exam. This action clearly indicates that the ministry is not satisfied with the students' performance. So by this action, near mastery is deemed unsatisfactory. Or whatever the term we call it. Near anything is unsatisfactory. Near anything. If you're near the finishing line, you don't win the race. So we can use terms to support our argument. The fact is, the students were below the minimum requirement, and we did not present it separately. We twin them and give a wrong impression. That is the fact. So whether it's near master or near any other thing, we did not present them discreetly and in a distinct way to send a clear message to the people. That is the essence of my argument, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, how comes in the mock exam we are classifying near mastery as satisfactory? Mr. President, let me ask, is there a change in the assessment ratings and reporting standard in the ministry? If yes, was this communicated to schools before the start of the implementation of PEP? Was a rating scale for this exam given to teachers? Or is this a deception and PR scam by the government to present a better picture of what really is? Mr. President, if in the literacy test near mastery is unsatisfactory, then the similar standard must or should be used in communicating any result to PEP. And if this is not so, I call on the minister to tell the nation, why the difference? Why the difference? If he said there's a difference, why the difference? And what is the meaning of the same term used under two different examination bodies, and how you come to two different conclusions? I'm merely asking questions, Mr. President. Am I not entitled to so do? I draw no conclusion. But maybe the questions are making the water getting muddier and muddier, and it's not as transparent as the minister would want it to be. Hence the state of his action today. Mr. President, this clearly demonstrates the fact that the government is suffering from an implementation deficit. And the minister is also the Minister of Information, in my view, has misinformed the public. I urge him to come clean and pep. State the truth. As one newspaper said in its headline, Senator Rees' pants is on fire. Mr. President, I urge the minister.
What?
Mr. President,
Water Commission.
I urge the minister, get the water, out the fire, wash away the mud that has been created, come clean and pep as we seek to restore the confidence in the education system, Mr. President. We need to do this so we all can believe and accept with confidence future data coming from the Ministry of Education, as well as information provided to the nation by the Minister of Information. We need to do this in the name of good governance, in the name of transparency and accountability, Mr. President. Mr. President, what is currently happening has resulted in a lack of trust in the government among critical stakeholders in education. If the Ministry of Education is confident about its approach and communication of the results, why the reluctance to share the data with key stakeholders, such as the Jamaica Teachers Association, after 1 month of asking, according to the president-elect of the Jamaica Teachers Association? If you are sure and you are confident that everything is right, share the result so we all can know, we can all assess, and we know what the truth is, and we come to a way forward as we proceed. So JT is a critical component in this teaching and education process. And after 1 month, they ask for the result, and according to the president-elect, they have yet to get it, or perhaps recently. But at the point of reporting, it did not get. What should it take you 1 month to share results that you should have on a computer system? They click off a button in seconds, right, Senator Sinclair? Should be very easy to do, right, Senator Longmore? Unless you're hiding something. Unless, I'm asking, man, we're having a conversation. Eh? No, I'm asking a question, man. When you afraid to answer a question? Eh? Don't do what? Not talking about JT. You keep on talking about schools. You can free to shut it down. The public will judge you.
Leader.
You always vote against progress.
Mr. President, the Speaker's time has elapsed. May we move that he be allowed sufficient time to complete his presentation.
The question is that the Speaker's time should be extended to allow him to finish his presentation. Those in favor?
Thank you, Mr.
Those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank the Minister for moving that motion.
Did I hear you say thanks to the Minister?
I said thank you, Mr. President, and the Minister for moving the motion. Mr. President, I carry no grudge. I'm here to represent the people of Jamaica and talk on their behalf. So, Mr. President, in the name of transparency and accountability, I call on the Minister to provide full disclosure. I call on other stakeholders such as the National Parent Association and the National Student Council to join this call. Mr. President, our little children are hurting, fearful, nervous, confused, and unsure. It is important for us all to remember that the exit exam at grade 6 oftentimes determines the ultimate pathway and future outcome of these children right up to adulthood, Mr. President. Today, the government led by Honourable Andrew Holness, the Ministry of Education led by Senator Reid, as a result of the poor implementation, has left our children at a crossroad crying, Mr. President. Mr. President, the primary failure on the ministry's part was to have this new exam implemented so close to the rollout of the new standard curriculum. Time should have been given to observe and assess implementation process, gather feedback, and make adjustments as we proceed. Always remember, Mr. President, there's a difference between planning and implementation. A difference between theory and practice. The government apparently did not remember that. There should have been a phase in of PEP while we phase out GSAT, Mr. President. That's what good leaders do to prevent chaos and confusion. What was needed was an orderly transformation, Mr. President, where this examination is concerned. The minister has failed in this regard. PEP should be the new exam for the current grade 4 students, while the current grade 5 and 6 students should be the last set of students to sit the examination under GSAT, Mr. President. How can you create a proper profile of a learner in his or her final year of primary school? That's what PEP is. Primary exit profile. You're going to have that in 1 year. So what will the grade 7 teachers do with that profile? This would give the government time for smooth implementation. Therefore, allowing for sufficient time to properly prepare our teachers, create new resource materials, and develop and administer relevant sample items with the respective assessment categories, and having meaningful consultations with teachers, parents, boards, textbook writers, and publishers, and the students themselves, because they are the critical aspect of this transformation. In this way, we would have created learners that are ready, motivated, on their way to be good critical thinkers and real problem solvers. You see, Mr. President, we continue to operate within an assessment culture in the classroom, where we test students to see if they are failing, rather than to do so to measure their success. We must create a new culture in assessment for learning, as well as of learning, and certify our students as ready for life so they can adapt to all realities, Mr. President. This is what 21st century educational leaders must strive for. The Minister of Education must take the lead as the key in this cultural revolution. With respect to the implementation of PEP, Mr. President, I am sorry to say, but the government has dropped the catch big time. Clear evidence of real implementation deficit on the part of the government. Mr. President, is another program in the ministry that is suffering from an implementation deficit. The Alternative Pathway to Secondary Education, APES. A program where approximately 50 schools across the island, grade 7 students are placed in groups according to their GSAT grades for special intervention activities so as to improve their learning and ultimately their academic performance. Mr. President, in one particular school, the grade 7 cohort has 11 students on Pathway 1. That is students achieving GSAT average 50% or more, 11, grade 7. 80 students on Pathway 2, students receiving average 30 to 49. And 108 students on Pathway 3, that is students averaging, getting an average below 29%. 108. Another school, a little bit better. 100 students on Pathway 1, over 50%. 64 on Pathway 2, 30 to 49. 35 on Pathway 3, below 30. It's a reality, Mr. President. Not playing politics with this. Not playing politics with GSAT. Those who want to can, but there are some of us who can't afford, because the public school remains our only choice of many citizens of Jamaica. So we can play it all we want, and we can PR it all we want. We must accept where it's working, where it's not working, and fix it, Mr. President, and fix it once and for all. So, Mr. President, in the school also, 15 of these grade 7 students were assessed to be reading at the pre-primary level. We can begin to imagine the problems that we are facing at these secondary schools, what we call upgraded. And there are some 50 on this program, and the results is generally the same across the board. Mr. President, in most of these schools on the program, the teachers are not trained to implement the intervention that is needed with respect to Pathway 1 and 2. There are no social workers or psychologists to work with the students in these schools to deal with issues such as anger management. No trained special education teachers, Senator Morris, to diagnose and treat learners with learning challenges. No constant and direct engagement with parents. Understaffing with respect to critical human resources needed to effectively intervene and help these students. A lack of critical resources to aid the teaching and learning process, as well as limited access to technology to aid the intervention initiatives. So, Mr. President, while we have a good concept to help our most needed students, those who did not grasp critical skills at the primary level, such as literacy and numeracy skills, the system is once again failing them because we are not adequately giving the program all the critical resources needed. Unfortunately, Mr. President, if we don't rescue them before reaching grade 9, they will just float through the system and become part of the statistics of those we classified as unattached youths. I urge the government to find the financial resources needed to make this program work, to employ needed professionals, and to acquire the necessary teaching aids as we advance the mission to rescue all our students, Mr. President. Mr. President, we need to erect less expensive signs and put more money to education. Mr. President, we need to erect less expensive signs and put more money to education. We need to cut corruption and waste in government, like what we saw in the used car scandals. $600 million spending under the guise of bushing program, like what we saw in Petrojam, Nessal, and Universal Service Fund, and give more money to education, Mr. President. We need to spend the contribution given by Heart and Tay for education more efficiently and for better and sustainable outcomes. If we get it right the first time, we'll spend less on intervention mechanisms, less on special work programs, less on fighting crime and violence. We'll also have no need for special zones of operations, nor the use of state of emergencies to fight crime. No need to build more lockups for our citizens if we spend more on education. We started the process and we're implementing without confusion. We will have a more orderly, safer, just, and progressive society. Mr. President, let us remember, education is the ultimate transformational tool that will facilitate the empowerment of all our people, Mr. President. Mr. President, as the Ministry of Education seeks to provide specialist science teachers at primary schools, a move I welcome, let us accept that a big challenge that will be faced is the lack of resource materials and laboratory space. These teachers can't just be seen as content providers. They must make science hands-on and minds-on. They must let the subject come alive, embrace the practical approach, and link the concepts to everyday life as we seek to make it relevant. The teachers must stimulate the minds of the young ones and develop in them at that early age the scientific skills needed to foster discovery learning and the scientific attitudes critically needed for survival. Mr. President, in this respect, science kits and mobile science labs must be made available to our primary schools before the implementation of this initiative, Mr. President. If we don't, the stated objectives will not be achieved and the problem-solving skill, analytical skill, skills in evaluating and synthesizing that we want to develop in our children will remain a goal to be pursued, but never to achieve. Mr. President, let me say publicly to the Minister. Minister, let me say publicly to you. Don't want to hear, Mr. President. But I'll talk nonetheless. Mr. President, let me say publicly to the Minister. Call on us when you have challenges. We know how to implement without chaos and confusion. We left the blueprint here. We were the ones that conceptualized all the plans you have at the ministry, and we were implementing without confusion. We are the doers in education. Whether it is in the expansion of our schools, building of new schools, transforming of existing schools into high schools, greater focus on technical and vocational training, removal of shift systems in many schools, the creation of diagnostic centers, the parenting commission, science, technology, engineering, mathematics initiative in our schools, that's STEM, development of national standard curriculum, drivers education in schools, math coaches in schools, literacy coaches in schools, expansion of nutrition program, enhanced teacher training and capacity building for all our stakeholders. Yes, we are the doers in education, Mr. President. Build more schools than any other government. It's always a process. Build more schools than any other government. Upgraded all secondary schools to high schools. Expanded hundreds of schools. Transform and smoothly implement. Hear this one now. Transform and smoothly implement curriculum changes at periodic time, such as the smooth implementation of the ROSE program. Minister, when you finish debate again, I'll continue.
No, man, you continue. Them confused.
Modernize and expand our teacher training institution. Open access to tertiary education to all strata of the society, Mr. President. We did that. Establish an early childhood commission to transform early childhood education. Facilitate the technological integration in our education sector. Just to name a few, Mr. President. Time won't allow me to name all today. We are the true implementers. We did it before without chaos, confusion, and pain to our people, Mr. President. We implemented common entrance then, no confusion. Instead, total praises, even from your side then. Governor, I know you can attest to that. Senator Gale. We implemented the change from common entrance to GSAT. Smooth transition. Come talk to us. We know how to implement change without chaos. We are the masters in implementing change without chaos, Mr. President. When we built our miles of carpet across the country, we did it without pain to our people. We are the true masters of implementation. We know how to bring change without chaos, Mr. President. Unfortunately, Mr. President, PEP, the road work in the corporate area, changes in our health sector. Mr. President, Mr. President, that's another State of the Nation debate. Unfortunately, Mr. President, Mr. President, PEP.
Senators, will you allow Senator Skeffrey? He's summing up. Will you allow
No, man, I'm not summing up. Just halfway.
Oh, sorry.
Just
sorry.
halfway. Just halfway. I'm in no haste. Just halfway. When I saw the agenda, just both of us, I decided to take the entire afternoon. Unfortunately, Mr. President, PEP, the road work in the corporate area, changes in our health sector, the passage of critical bills such as NIDS, treatment of detainees under the state of emergency, challenges facing our coffee farmers, appointment of the Chief Justice, handling of the public sector salary negotiation, such as the ones with the police and teachers, clearly demonstrates the fact that this government does not know how to implement. The verdict is in, Mr. President. They cannot bring change without chaos, Mr. President. Mr. President, not even the Bulla program in schools can this government implement without confusion. 1 minute Bulla is out. No, it is back, Mr. President. This government is suffering from a real implementation deficit, Mr. President. They don't know what they're doing. Mr. President, Mr. President, when we led the Transformation in Education initiative, started in 2004, we implemented many changes, seamless changes, revolutionary changes, no confusion, no demonstration, and yes, we change without chaos. We are the opposition at the discussion table at all the time because we believe that politics and education is like oil and water, can't mix, and must never seek to do so, Mr. President. It is the ultimate transformational tool of the nation. Minister, cut the ego. Let us cooperate in the interest of our students and the country. Let us collaborate. Let us do it for our children. Mr. President, with respect to tertiary education funding, we continue to witness the annual threat of deregistration of a number of our students at the University of West Indies and perhaps other institutions. This remains a real issue, and we must find sustainable solutions to the problem. Mr. President, over a year ago, I moved a motion in this Honourable House calling on the government to establish a parliamentary committee to focus on this issue in the search for solutions. The motion was passed, Mr. President. I therefore call on the government to establish this committee urgently so we can invite all stakeholders to make their submissions. Tertiary institutions, Ministry of Education, Student Loan Bureau, student leaders, among others, as we deliberate to find long-term solutions to a pressing problem, the funding of tertiary education. Mr. President, I ask, why the reluctance on the part of government to establish this committee? Let us show that we care about the needy tertiary students and move with haste to give them a sustainable pathway to the challenges they are facing with respect to funding tertiary education. And in that regard, Mr. President, last week when Senator Morris made his contribution, he stated that to his understanding, the university and the government is reducing the ratio, the 80 to 20, in terms of what the government side is reducing the ratio from 80 to 20, 80 for government, 20 for students, and we're reducing it. And he asked if this is so. The minister whispered and said yes. I'm asking officially, is this so, Mr. President, to the minister? Will there be a reduction in the percentage contribution of tertiary, of University of West Indies, government to the University of West Indies for our students? Yeah. And if that is so, then we need to start to have that conversation with the public. It can't be a secret. The students must know what is happening to give them time to plan for the transition so they can prepare themselves, Senator Samud. It can't take them come July, August, and then we have confusion, demonstration. If that is the reality, be bold to come and tell the students so we can know where we're going as we organize effectively. I don't know if this is so. Senator Morris mentioned it, the minister whispered yes, but since then a week has passed for this critical issue, and I'm sure, Senator Samuda, you can understand what may expire. Mr. President, I will now give some specific recommendations that can lead to an improvement in the education sector. Mr. President, in my time as a classroom teacher, I became professionally and emotionally vested in leading and supporting a vision for educational equity, which is also shared by many of my colleagues. The vision is to create the best conditions that can lead to equitable learning outcomes and to provide all our students with the right resources they need to learn and adapt to a changing world, regardless of race, gender, income, parental background, community, among other factors. Mr. President, I have been fortunate to be part of teams in various schools that I have taught that shared my passion for achieving educational equity. But I was also humbled by the challenges presented on this path. We need to advocate for changes that will uproot the foundation of long-standing institutions, policies, and practices. The longer we take to do this, we'll feel that the transformation needed in our education sector is an uphill, impossible battle, no matter how many educators are working for the cause. Mr. President, as successive governments ventured into new roles and collaborate with key stakeholders in the policy-making process, such as education technology developers, teacher trainers, and educational leaders, we need to embrace an approach that will create an enthusiasm for a vision to expand our education sector. We need new and retrained educators as we seek to improve students' experiences. Mr. President, I know to achieve this objective, the struggle may feel daunting at times, but we must always feel that this outcome is far more achievable from new strategies and right leadership. Mr. President, with ongoing collaboration and learning, I have gained a refreshed understanding of what's needed to achieve our goals. And I remain adamant that we can achieve educational equity. This we must do as we seek to create a Jamaica that works for all and end the two-tier educational apartheid system that is crippling the education system, and to ensure we only have one pathway at the secondary level for all our students, Mr. President. And this pathway must be the progressive pathway with quality learners in all our schools.
Progressive.
The Ministry of Education, all stakeholders, principals, school boards must start with a united vision for what equity looks like in their schools, regions, and the central ministry. A vision that encompasses a thorough understanding of student needs, collaboration among stakeholders, and a deep understanding into the current landscape in which students are functioning, including school policies and cultural factors that influence student experiences. Mr. President, educational leaders also should have a strong understanding of the largest barriers to student success, the greatest resources or assets available to overcome those barriers, and the most effective ways to measure progress. Mr. President, in this transformation, we need access to new education technologies and resources. Let me acknowledge that we have made significant progress in this area, but we still have some ways yet to go. Schools must understand the importance of broadband internet, and the government must explore all possible ways to ensure that the new digital programs are introduced in our schools to enhance teaching and learning. So, President, many of our students, especially those at the early childhood level and the primary levels in rural Jamaica, still lack the broadband capability necessary for digital learning. Ironically, Mr. President, these students who are affected by a lack of digital access at the schools are those who need it most. In addition, many students impacted by poverty don't have the ability to connect to the internet at home, and therefore have few opportunities to use technology for the purpose of learning or to support schoolwork and study after class. I propose, Mr. President, that the Ministry of Education partners in a more formal way with the Universal Service Fund and make as a start all primary schools now without access to internet service a community access point over the next 2 to 3 years. Provide internet access in our primary schools. This will be a win-win for the government, students, the community, as we will provide a critical service that will modernize and transform all classrooms at the primary schools. Make them learner-friendly, enhance learning, and also facilitate our citizens at the primary level. This is a bold move that will transform teaching and learning, allow learning to be relevant, worthwhile, and hands-on. We must do this, Mr. President, and at the same time provide the supporting gadgets to foster learning. We must do this now as we seek to break down the inequality in our education system as we create a Jamaica that works for all, Mr. President. Mr. President, the most promising movement towards education and equity that can be made is the introduction of technology into our classroom. Advanced adaptive technologies address students' needs in real time, and student data insight provide educators with an in-depth understanding of students' progress. But just as technology presents exciting opportunities, it also carries complications. The intelligent use of technology can transform and improve almost every aspect of the school, modernizing the nature of curriculum, student assignments, parental connections, and administration. Online curricula now include lesson plans, simulations, and demonstrations for classroom use and review. So, President, we must upgrade all our classrooms with this 21st century approach as we seek to break down the Babylon system of education inequalities in our nation, Mr. President. With online connections, students can share their work and communicate more productively and creatively. Teachers can maintain records and assessments using software tools and stay in close touch with students and families via email, WhatsApp, text messages, voicemail, and others, Mr. President. Schools can reduce administrative costs by using technology tools and other fields, as other fields have done, and provide more funds for the classroom. We know that technology alone is not enough to combat inequality. The technology we introduce into the classroom can only move the needle on equity when it is used purposefully. In other words, the integration and implementation of technology is just as important as the quality of technology itself. Educators need the support of the government, robust ongoing professional development, and a clear defined mission for personalized learning to leverage technology, with the purpose of empowering all our students. So, President, along with supporting new blended learning models in the classroom, where students are expected to engage with technology and learn outside of the school walls. There are other opportunities that we need to provide for them. These include access to other factors that will enhance equity. This can be done by strengthening the community engagement. School must forge greater partnership with the business community, organization, and youth centers that play a major role in student lives, and work with them to expand broadband access, provide teaching and learning resource materials, both hardware and software, or provide additional safe space for learning. Parental engagement is also essential to achieve equity goals. In an era where our classrooms are becoming increasingly diverse and students come from a variety of cultural backgrounds, schools need to work harder than ever to get parents engaged with their learning community in meaningful ways, such as homework centers, fostering discipline at home, greater supervision for homework, promote punctuality, and increase attendance in school. Mr. President, our education system must rise to the task as we bring about the transformation in schools and specifically in the classroom. As we seek to improve student learning, let me encourage all teachers to embrace project-based learning and advance its acceleration in the classrooms. Students must go beyond the textbook to study complex topics based on real issues so as to make learning more meaningful. Also, Mr. President, cooperative learning must continually be promoted as we seek to have our students working together on project teams and guided by trained teachers. Students will learn skills of collaborating, managing emotions, and resolving conflicts in groups. Mr. President, I am of the view that preparing for our teaching career should follow a model of apprenticeships, in which trainees learn from experienced masters. Student teachers should spend less time in lecture halls, learning educational theories, and more time in classrooms, working directly with student and master teachers. Teaching skills should be continually sharpened, with time to take courses, attend conferences, and share lessons and tips with other teachers, online and in person. I therefore proposed this model to the government with a view to restructure teacher training. I further propose that we implement the master teacher concept within our schools starting next academic year. We can do this on a pilot phase, Mr. President. Assign these teachers to school in the quality education circles, QEC, as they work with teachers about the primary and secondary level and ultimately at the early childhood level. These master teachers will share best practices, lead common planning time, share methodologies or teaching strategies best applied to bring about learning, identify and guide the teachers towards relevant resource materials, and facilitate assessment strategies relevant to concepts they have taught. This will improve the quality of teachers in the system and ultimately student performance. Also, Mr. President, I am proposing that we develop a formal mentorship for new and young teachers. There are many teachers who have retired and will be more than happy to offer their service on a voluntary basis or for a small stipend to schools near where they are living. I am recommending that we formalize this initiative. The Guidance Council department in the ministry at the regional levels, working with the Guidance Council departments in the schools, should lead this initiative. Pair them with specific teachers. They could assist with the alternative pathway to secondary education program, for example. They could assist with reading at the primary level. And they could also share ideas about methodologies with the teacher and guide them when they go through certain stress in the classroom and their overall experience. I therefore suggest that the government establish a core team to work through the details for these two recommendations as we seek to implement, in order to bring about the much needed transformation in the sector for quality performance for all our students. They have a wealth of experiences that could be useful to both teachers and students. Let us do this as we adopt an integrated approach in search for solutions to our classroom problems. I am also recommending a similar mentorship program for our boys in selected schools as a start. This could begin at grade 9 or even lower, where we will partner with successful male role models. They'll be like a father, as most youngsters lack this important figure in their lives. A big brother, a friend, a counselor, and a motivational force for our young males. Respective schools should lead this with the ministry playing a supportive role. Mr. President, some of our boys in particular need urgent rescue. This initiative could be the catalyst in achieving that, Mr. President. Mr. President, I further propose a reorganizing and restructuring of the school resources of time, money, and facilities. The school day should allow for a more in-depth project work beyond the 30 to 40-minute period, including block scheduling of classes 2 hours or so for project development. More money in the ministry should be directed to the classroom and not to the bureaucracy within government, Mr. President. So, President, as we seek to advance transformation in education, it is critical that we make amendments with respect to important legislations that guide the sector. Currently, we have a 1965 Education Act and a 1980 Code of Regulation that dictates operation in our school system. These important legislative tools are now outdated, Mr. President, and the review process is taking too long. Started on our side, now with the current government. Doesn't matter where it started, it is taking just too long to give the system the necessary legislative support as we transform the sector, Mr. President. And there are issues such as how we appoint principals, deployment of teachers, employment of teachers, how we deal with the composition of boards, disciplinary issues in the school for both students, academic and support staff, a number of issues that are directly in the code, but the practice sometimes outlives what is currently in the code. All I'm calling for is an update of this critical act and the regulation so we can always be ahead of time within the modern period as we transform education. The policies and programs alone is not sufficient. Legislative support is important to give the educational leaders the legislative tool and backing as they make changes that will be sustainable as we move forward. In the same vein, Mr. President, I am calling for an update on the Jamaica Teaching Council bill. It has been out there for quite a while. Where are we with this? When will it be tabled in Parliament? Has the ministry completed the consultation with relevant stakeholders with respect to this bill? And can the minister say if all critical parties are on board as we proceed? Time comes, Mr. President, to have a legislative revolution within the education system so as to make the transformation sustainable. Mr. President, I quickly turn to about 3 other issues. Minister Reid, you can rest assured I finish your portfolio, so you can be at greater ease now. Mr. President, I will now briefly turn to those other issues. With respect to farmers, approximately 22,000 based on statistics from JS, and there are roughly 70% or 154,000 that do not have title for the lands that they are farming on. These are generational lands, or lands that they were relocated on, and they do not have title for that, Mr. President. We need to enhance the title mechanism for our farmers as we move forward. Also, Mr. President, in South Central Jamaica, where I'm from, the issue of drought remains a constant problem annually. We can almost predict, and our farmers are hurting. I call on the government to establish a drought mitigation task force with critical stakeholders, not just at the bureaucracy level, but within the community on the ground, so we can have a discussion and search for meaningful solutions to solve the impact of this problem to our farmers and our citizens generally when drought comes. We know every time, and we buy some black drums, and we give them some seed and cutlass and things like those, and every year the problem remains. Time comes for us to find and implement sustainable solution to protect our rural folks as we make them more productive and advance to a quality life that we all seek for them. So, and encourage that as we move forward, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I coming down, I will not close this presentation without condemning the men who are hurting our women and children. I say to the men, women are not your properties. You don't own them. If it's not working, just pack your bags and go. You cannot hurt, whether physically or verbally. The women must be loved and protected, and I condemn those men. I call them cowards, physically, emotionally, or verbally. And I call them cowards. Any man that beat a woman, for sure to them in charge, them a coward, Mr. President. I must condemn and condemn forcefully. And also, those big rusky men who are having sex with teenage girls, underage, they must stop it.
Yes, sir.
But the state apparatus is failing. Because every time a young girl, 14, 15, I hear about 11 and 12, they get pregnant, they go to clinic, they go to hospital. So as they're rolling into the clinic, the police will be rolling to the house to find them, lock them up, arrest them, build the fight case, and let the justice system take its course. We just send a message to them. Let them grow up. Let them enjoy their teenage years. Let them play and study with love and harmony. And we must send a signal to our men. It is wrong. We must stop it. But the state must have the will to deal with it in a forceful way as we move forward, Mr. President. And Mr. President, finally, before I close, I'm a bit surprised that the members of the Internal and External Affairs Committee would shut down a recommendation to prevent detainees to come to the People's Parliament to share their experiences. The Parliament is the court of the land, the People's Court. And if they can't go to the Parliament, where else can they go? I urge them at the next sitting of the committee to review that decision. No harm can be done if you believe in information flow and transparency and accountability. Let all sides contend and let the truth rise if we have nothing to add. I fail to conclude, do not want to conclude, that this is an example of us bordering on a dictatorship state. I don't believe it. But let's not provide evidence for people to think so. Nothing wrong can be done. Public defender gave her side. Government has their side. Police theirs. The detainees who felt it, they knew it better than anyone, should also have, if they so desire. And you might hope that they don't come, but give them the opportunity to come to the People's Parliament and let the truth surface as we move forward in a transparent way. So, Mr. President, in closing, let me say to my Jamaican brothers and sisters, we're a beautiful country. A resilient and strong set of people. Despite the prosperity train grinding to a halt, let me encourage you all to remain strong. Keep the faith. Stay focused on your goals. Maintain your fixity of purpose. Do not be despaired. Keep hope alive. The higher order progressive train is still rolling. We are working on your plans to build a Jamaica that works for all and to remove the barriers to progress and development. Rest assured, we on this side will always continue to fight against inequalities in society, in keeping to our party's principle of social justice, equality, and integrity as we focus on nation building. We are the true builders and implementers. We have led change without chaos, and we will do it again, Mr. President. Stand firm, my Jamaican people. It remains a struggle, but we will overcome. May God bless this great nation. Give us peace and happiness abundantly. Give us vision lest we perish in this beautiful land. I thank you, Mr. President. Peace and love.
Mr. President, I want to thank our colleagues for those two riveting presentations. And permit me, sir, for speaking for a seat clearly does not belong to me. There is no intention to continue any further business today, so we're recommending that the Senate be adjourned, suspend the debate, and for the Senate to be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
There is, I like the motion. Senator Morris, are you standing, sir? Would you just allow me to suspend the debate?
Okay.
And then the question is that the debate be suspended for a future date. Those in favor? Those against? Of course, the ayes have it. Senator Morris.
Rise to bring to the attention of this honorable chamber that next week will be celebrated as Disability Awareness Week, and on Monday in particular is International Disability Awareness Day. And this year the theme is empowering persons with disabilities and ensuring, Mr. President, inclusiveness and equality. Mr. President, we have approximately 400,000 persons with disabilities living in our island. And these are individuals who are categorized as the most vulnerable within our society. And they are confronted with major challenges, major issues that they have not created on themselves. And in any society, any self-respecting society, we owe it to ensure that we put in place measures to accommodate these individuals and to facilitate their smooth transition and inclusion in society. And persons with disabilities in Jamaica are not asking for any handout or any charity. What they want are opportunities that will allow them to make meaningful contribution to the society. And I want to urge the members of the society to give their support to persons with disabilities, to allow them to participate in the society, and recognize that they have talents that are beneficial to the society. And once they are given the opportunity, they will make use of it and make a significant contribution to the advancement of our country. Our country is replete with examples of persons with disabilities who have made significant contributions to the society. You talk about Sarah Newland Martin, who has been one of the outstanding sportswomen in this country. And I tell you, Mr. President, Sarah was one of the first women to have swum the Kingston Harbor without any legs. And some people don't recall or understand that. We have Fab Five Band, Mr. President, which is the longest serving band, musical band in this country. And we have a number of other individuals with disabilities who have been making significant contribution to this country. And so we just want the society to allow these individuals to be given the opportunity to participate, and so that the broader country can benefit from their inclusion. May it please you, Mr. President. Okay, thank you very much, Senator Brown. And next week, Monday, at 6 o'clock at the University of the West Indies, in association with CARICOM, I will be doing an inaugural lecture on the theme, the CARICOM Special Rapporteur on Disability, Driving the Disability Agenda in the region. And it is going to be focusing on the roadmap to making sure that the entire Caribbean becomes an inclusive and equitable space for all persons with disabilities. And I invite all the members of the Senate to be there. It will be at the library. We have changed the venue to the main library. Thank you.
Mr. President, we on this side share and echo the sentiments as expressed by Senator Morris. And we know that he has been a very strong advocate for persons living with disabilities. I share my own experience watching my mother, who worked for 40 years at the National Children's Home, in her commitment geared towards supporting those kids with disabilities. And I agree, Senator Morris, where these persons, notwithstanding their challenge, they can be viewed as the most committed individuals for the sense of purpose in whatever they do. And so the country owes them a great deal in extending the level of support. I am pleased to indicate that the occupational safety and health legislation, with both Senator Skeffrey and Senator Brown and Senator Longmore and myself, there are areas in that piece of legislation that is treating with workers who have to undergo and work in conditions despite their challenges. And we would want to ensure that in that scenario, those workers don't have to fit into the working conditions, but the working conditions must be designed to suit their capabilities. And so, Mr. President, I share the sentiments on this side, and we always welcome any assistance, any support, any recommendation geared towards treating with those individuals who unfortunately live with disabilities. We so thank you, Mr. President. On that note, sir, we move for the adjournment for a date to be fixed.
The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it. Now that you're standing, the Senate stands adjourned.
My mother tells me that when I was a teenager, she noticed a dip in my mood every year around the time of exams in school. In my second year of university, I experienced a number of challenging events that led to my very first panic attack. And in my fourth year, I went through the darkest period of my life where I isolated myself from my family and my friends, and I struggled